Hello, this is a new episode of What's Wrong with My Picture. And if you'd like to have your pictures reviewed, email them to me at the email address below in the description of this video. And if you'd like to see more of these reviews and hopefully learn from my critiques, follow me. You will find all the links down below and support me on Patreon. So let's take a look. Today's artist is Monika Lis. She's a photographer based in New York, and her story is NYC. So the story to me is sort of on a borderline between fashion and portrait story. And her idea behind the story was to tell how a girl who comes from a small town tries to find her place under the sun in New York, feeling a little bit lost, maybe insecure. So let's take a look and see if we get this feeling from the story, or what kind of story we can get from these images. So the first opening shot is of this model-looking young woman standing on the stairs of some kind of old building, possibly church. I love the colors. I think the color palette looks very nice and sort of very limited to this brown, yellow hues. Looks really pretty. She is in this very static, sort of symmetrical kind of pose that you would maybe use for a commercial fashion photography, a catalog or something like that. To me, the body language is not that expressive in terms of what she's, the story that we are trying to tell. But maybe as an establishing shot of, a wider frame, her standing on the stairs, it could still work. Let's take a look at the next shot. Okay, she's walking and next to some theater sign, comedy club, something like that. Really beautiful lighting here. I like the golden elements here, like the light catching the side of her face, cheekbone. The golden earring plays here really well with the other elements behind her. The overall color palette again here works really well. It's this warmer yellow-brown hues, worked really nicely. Also, I like the contrast between like cooler tones in the back behind her and on the sign and on the theater, and slightly cooler light on this face, and then the warmer highlights on the other side. So in general, I would say the photographer knows her lighting and knows the composition, but to me, it's a very fashion shot, that she's just walking, looking beautiful, rather than a story that she's lost and she's trying to find her place in New York City, like her to establish herself in New York City. I don't see much of that mood and emotion out of this picture. Is more of, again, like that typical model walk, which I think can be beautiful on its own, can work for a fashion editorial. But if you're trying to tell more of a personal story, or something more emotional to catch the viewer's attention, then this picture is not enough to me. So it really depends on your goal, right? From a fashion standpoint, like if it was a fashion story, to me, the fashion is, she's beautifully dressed and definitely with attention to details, but it's more of a lifestyle kind of, how she's dressed, what she's wearing, more of a personal style, maybe a blogger or something like that, more of a personal rather than a fashion statement necessarily reflecting on the current trends in the industry. So if I were a magazine editor, a fashion magazine editor, not any other lifestyle, for example, then I would find that picture not suitable for a magazine, because it doesn't really reflect on current trends, current designers, things like that. So it's not fashion enough. So that's, I think, the main problem. Even though the photographer clearly sees the shot, directs the model, and all those components are present, but what is missing here is a clear intention, whether it's a portrait shoot, a personal story, or it's a fashion shoot. Then the fashion component is missing for me. Next shot with the same outfit, same sort of brown color palette, really beautiful, very cinematic horizontal framing, looks very nice. But again, her pose is very traditional sort of fashion pose, like take a stance, you're cool, you're sort of confident, looking to the side, lips slightly open. Works for fashion, doesn't work for me as a personal story. So I can't see a story here of a girl trying to make it in New York City. She's just standing looking to the side. Again, if it's a fashion story, then okay, totally works. Okay, next shot. Same sort of, again, standard traditional, checking her face, grabbing the hair, posing. Posing is the word that I always mention when I work with photographers who are in the beginning of their career and they're trying to find their own voice and their own approach to directing their models. So posing is something that you try and need to break when you're working with models. Just break them out of that pattern, that mold. Please don't pose, just be real, be honest. Even if you're doing fashion, and if you see my other reviews that I've done of fashion photographers, you will see that current trend is more about the real and honest emotion rather than posing and sort of pretending. Although for some fashion photographers it still works, and there are some photographers who still approaching their work in this way, but I feel like the trends have moved on and you need to find a more authentic, more real self-expression of the model in the shot rather than a traditional sort of pose. Therefore, it brings us to the next shot, which I find that has this component of the real emotion, a moment that happened, and it still doesn't take us away from the fashion realm. It still looks quite fashionable to me. Of course, it's a beautiful young woman and there's a fashion element of what she's wearing, the style, the makeup, all of that. It is there, but it's more interesting to look at because you really think it's that moment. And I think that this image is the most emotional out of the entire shot, and I wish all the other images would have the same kind of quality. That would bring the whole story to the next level. And the last shot, finishing this story, she's walking away from us, and I think it's a good decision in terms of the storytelling to really finish, and kind of she's walking away looking back at us. She looks really beautiful here and her face is very engaging, but again I can't get rid of that feeling that she's just doing it because she's learned to do it, and it's not her real self, like not a moment that was caught. She was just walking away looking back because she knows it works. And I think if you want to grow in this direction, you need to try and learn how to work with models in a way that you distract them somehow or push them, maybe even by repeating the same thing again or showing them how you want them to be, but try and get them out of the standard mode, what they are giving, because they know it looks good. And it does look good, but at a certain point we've seen these images so many times that we are stopping believing them for a second. So I think that's the next stage for any fashion photographer is to get an emotionally engaging images. And if it's not a fashion shoot, and then if it's a personal story, it's a story about her, then I think it's even more important to give us that sense of a story of her being lost in the city or trying to make it in the city. Therefore, I would expect more empowering images that she's really making it, maybe combined with the times of frustration. But that's a different story, right? Then it's a portrait shoot, and it still has to be focused more on, on storytelling. And the storytelling is obviously the components of composition, the light, and the model herself, and her body language and her facial expressions. So all in all, I think it's a beautiful work, and Monika is a really accomplished photographer. I know that from seeing her other work, she knows what she's doing, and the photography elements are all there. It's now that next stage that you have to get into when your work is really unique and authentic. I hope this review was helpful to Monika and to all of you watching. If you would like to see more of these videos, please like and subscribe and see my other channels. Thank you.